Can you really buy Stevie Ray Vaughan's tone? Well, today I'm building the ultimate SRV Tubescreamer on Tagboard. I'll be using vintage and mojo components to build the best possible Tubescreamer I can. And here's the twist. At the end, I'm going to pit it against a budget Tubescreamer and a Tamora modified TS808. Cheers. Here we have all of the components we're going to need for today's build. It feels good to be getting back to building something on Tagboard. And this one's a monster. So this is the Tagboard I'm going to be using. 14 tags either side. This is probably the biggest tag I've ever done now so far. I think this might even be bigger than the ZVEX thing that I built. So, what have we got? We've got all of our resistors here. I've tried to use some vintage E-type ones, or at least old ones. Some of them I've had to use, for example, this one is 3 different resistors that I'm going to wire up in series to make the 510k, just because I didn't have one. Adapt and overcome and all that jazz. We've also got our caps. Some of these are pretty cool. I mean, check out this bad boy. I'm pretty sure these used to come in the old Dan Electro amplifiers and stuff. I got this one from my buddy Warren. He sent me over this massive package full of components, capacitors and all this stuff to kit out my new workshop, and some beauties in there like this one. So I'll be using that. And then of course we have our input and output buffers. I haven't quite decided on which ones I'm going to be using, which transistors I'll be using for that, so we'll get to that when we get to it. Then Opamp. We've got our old favourite Opamp. There's 2 single Opamps wired onto the same board to make a dual Opamp. This time, if I stop throwing it away, get on Joe, well done. Mess up all my layout there, perfect. This time I am not going to be changing out Opamps and messing about. I'm just going to use this Opamp, and the comparison will be between this and a few other pedals. Now on to the important bit. A shout out has to go to Simon from JSA FX Pedals for this, because he put me onto these MA150 silicon diodes. They sound terrible in just about everything but a Tubescreamer, and I believe these are the ones that come in the very early Tubescreamers. They're not that easy to find anymore, but I'll be using these ones in this, just 2 of them. On a side note, if you're planning on building a pedal that you're not too familiar with, I really advise that you lay out your components like this. You can see if you've missed anything then. So chances are when you're using this many components, you're probably going to miss something at some point. This is the Tagboard we're going to be populating, and I'm going to start off left to right as ever. Now the first resistor on here, it actually says 2 LED. Now, I'm not going to use that resistor. I'll wire up my LED the same way as I always do off board. So we're just going to move on to R7. First of all, we'll go straight down the middle, populate all of that, and then we'll populate everything that's going to be in the wings, as it were. So R7, and on my drawing, I can see R7's a 10k resistor. I went with these 10k resistors, which are actually modern ones. I use these because I noticed Marcus Reeves used these and the slightly larger ones, the same style, and we're having them on the show soon, so I figured, yeah, why not? Actually, I don't know whether the Marcus Reeves show will be out by the time this comes out or not, but how cool is that? That's R7 now in place. We're going to move on to C4. C4 on our drawing is a 47 UF cap. I'm using this tantalum cap. It's the same ones as we use on board. I do say it all the time. We use them in like in switching circuits and control circuits. Now, again, when you're using these caps, they're not always clearly marked up pos and neg, but the side with the large notch on the top is the pos and the other side is the neg. I have messed these up more than once. To use it, because it's rather large and it probably only just about squeeze in the tag, I like to make myself a little bit of space by bending the tags over, bending them back in on themselves, using my Nipex nips. Again, as ever, you can get these from the description down below. It's an Amazon affiliates link, so I do get a bit of kickback. However, there's no extra cost to yourself. I'm getting good at the old legal spiel now, aren't I? Anyway, I like to create this sort of shape, and then that way I can slide them in the tags without any issue. So if I just mirror that on this side, and it really doesn't matter how far you come in, to be honest, as long as you come in enough to make space for the tag to fit. So what I do is, if I'm looking at my drawing now, I know the negative's got to go upwards. So I'll slide the negative in first, slide it all the way back until it can't go any further. Then I'll take my snips and just snip in front of the tag here. It doesn't matter how far in front. And a top tip is to remove the little off cut before you start soldering, because sometimes that gets stuck in your joint, which is fantastic. Right, and then I'll slide the other half of it, if I can, into the tag there, and then line it up so it's roughly in the middle-ish. Now I know there's nothing else going into this top pin, so I'm going to solder the top pin, give the tip a little bit of a wet, and then if I solder that top pin there, or that top tag should I say, that's in place. Now I can bend it up, and now when I fitted my last component in there, I can solder this end, and we have our large cap now fits on the tag without any issue. And because our enclosure is massive, there's no worries about it fouling the top of the enclosure. So I've been working through the board. I've got a couple more caps and resistors in place, but now we're on to the diodes. And if I get the picture up, you can see that on this drawing from Audio Clone, that D1 and 2 are kind of stacked together in one half, so that would be like asymmetrical clipping. That's not how the Tubescreamer works. So if we're using our MA150 diodes, I just clip two of them out. On the actual drawing there, it's showing them positioned like this, one after another. That is no good. What we're actually going to do is, we're going to take them and flip one over like this, and that is going to clip each half of the sine wave. So this one, for example, is going to clip the positive half, and that one's going to clip the negative half. And now you can either put them into your tags just like this, or you can do what I call ridiculously the helicopter, for no other reason than I bend them over and twist them round like helicopter blades. And those of you who watch the show will know that I absolutely hate helos. I couldn't stand it. I can't think of anything worse than going up in one of them bloody things. Death traps. Anyway, so I'll do that, and then I'll do the same on this side, and that will then just fit straight in the tag as it is. Here's where we are so far, and we're just about to add C6, which is this 220 NF cap. It's rather large, and normally what I would do is I would drop it into the holes on the outside of the tags here. But because we're going to have a lot going on the outside of these tags with this board, I'm going to try a different technique I've never done before, and I'm going to take my old clippings. I always say this, save your component legs, they're invaluable. I'm going to take my old clippings, solder them in here and stick them up in here, and then I'm just going to solder that to them and have it sitting high off the board, so then I've got space underneath to fit all the other components. So as you can see, I've soldered in two of my component legs. Next step, I bent them over for no reason, definitely didn't need to do that. Next step is going to be laying this component across them legs like that, and then I'll just solder it in place. Obviously I will make sure it's straight. I'll solder it in place, and then that'll be fixed to the board. There we have it, a capacitor on stilts. So that'll sit above the board nicely. I quite like how it's turned out, and that'll keep it out the way of all the other stuff I've got to fit down the sides. Now we're on to the R14. It's at first of our 510k resistors. To get 510k, I've got 470k resistor and two 20k resistors. These are really nice old ones. That one's some sort of flame-proof new one. Makes 510k, happy with that. To fit these together and to make them go on the board, first things first, I am going to clean the legs. Of course, using my snips. Sometimes I do this with a Stanley blade, and I know you guys have some real cool ways of doing it. Please write it in the comments. If there's anything new that I haven't tried out, I'll definitely try it out and report back. So to join these together, I do that same twisty helicopter method. I can't believe I'm calling it the helicopter method. Now usually, because there's two of these the same and one different, I would have them in this sort of fashion twisted together. But because these look better than this one, vain, I know, ridiculous, I'm going to have them in that configuration. It really doesn't matter, but then when we're looking down on the pedal, you'll be able to see this resistor, which is a better looking resistor in my opinion. So you make a 90-degree angle, twist them together in the old helicopter method. Oh, I can't believe I'm saying that, but there you go. And then same again on this side. Just twist them together like so. And then when you've made this kind of skeleton looking thing, you can just give your soldering iron a wet the tip and then solder these little bits together. I've shown this before. I mean, I'm sure everyone's seen me use this before, but there you go. Careful. Well, usually I burn myself when I pick this up. Give it a minute. When you're clipping these two bits off here, you don't want to get as close. It's really tempting. You don't want to get as close to the resistors as you can. Yes, it would look neater, but what tends to happen is they just fall apart. There's not enough meat on the bone here to hold them together. So I go one click back. You do have this annoying little tag hanging out, if you enjoy that, but better that hang out and you've got a resistor that works in a pedal that people are going to stand on, it stays working for a long time, then clip it too short and have nothing. There you go. Now to fit it into my enclosure, all I do is just bend them out 90 degrees and then slide them through the tags like this. So slide one through, and then once that's through, you can just clip this leg to where you are, and it'll fit straight through that tag now, like so. And then once you've soldered it in, you can manipulate it and make it look kind of straight or square if you want to. So I'm going to go ahead and solder that in now. Right, so now I've got that leg in. What I normally do is I'll just take my flat nose pliers and just straighten it up. So then when I solder the other end in, you've kind of got where it's going to sit. It's going to sit like that. And then when you're looking down, you'll just see the resistor on top. Okay, I made a clear mistake here. This 1UF, which I had down as C1, C1 is actually a 10UF cap, 10 microfarad, and C2 is the 1UF. So I'm going to have to pull this out, move it over to this position, and put the 10UF here. And this is because I didn't tape my components down to the piece of paper. So they slid around a little bit, and I messed it up. Get on. There's our cap removed, and we're going to replace it with this 10 microfarad non-polar electrolytic. I've shown this before, but these non-polar ones, it doesn't matter which way round it goes. However, the longer leg would traditionally be the positive and the shorter leg the negative, and it indicates whether it's the inside or outside foil or whatever. I'm going to put the longer leg pointing upwards on our board because that's where the positive end of the cap would be, and I'll put the shorter leg going down on the board because that's where the negative end would be. Does it make a difference to noise? In a high voltage amplifier, I would say yes. In a pedal, probably not. But because I'm in here, I might as well do it anyway. That's all of our board populated down the centre. Next, if I get our diagram up, you'll see that in various spots, there's links joining together two of the tags. Next thing I'm going to add is the links. You can either do that with component legs going between them, or you can just use wire. Today, I'm just going to be using wire for simplicity. The first link we're going to be adding in is up here. It's 4 tags across, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Starts off where the clipping diodes go. Then it moves along another 2 tags, 1, 2, and then it goes in right here up against R5, which is a 51k resistor. I'm going to be using my silicone wire to add it in. We're making a blues pedal today, so it's going to be blue silicone wire, or I couldn't get any pink anymore because literally the world is running out of pink silicone wire. I will leave an affiliates link in the description, an Amazon link if you want to buy some of this wire. There isn't all that much of it going round left, I've got to say, but it is the good stuff. It's really flexible, and as you can see, when you add some heat to it, it doesn't sort of melt or anything, which is the key, really. So we're going in here where our resistors are, and we're going to go over to where the 51k resistor is, just here, which is 2 tags along. So if I just give that a strip and a tin, We can mount that through the center holes, like so. Give them a bend out on the underside, and then we can solder them in place, remembering that one of these tags has our really nice old diodes on that we don't want to burn out, so you don't want to hang about on there for too long, but at the same time you do want a good joint. Take away the excess. There's our first link wire now in place. I'm going to go ahead and fit in all the other link wires before moving on to the final components. There's our 3 links fitted on the outside edge. Next we're going to move on to the components. If I get the drawing up, you can see first in the top left corner we've got our polarity protection diode. Then we've got R17, R8, and then on the other side R16. I'm going to fit these. So if I take my diode and I can see that the negative side wants to point to the right. Now to fit these diodes, I like to keep them off the board a little bit, and that's because the heat from the board could damage the diode. They do get damaged easy, although these higher voltage, I think this is a 1 kilovolt diode, but these higher voltage diodes tend not to be as finicky with heat as some of the germanium ones and stuff. So if we fit that in there like that, and then solder it in, wet the tip, give it a solder. It's just going to solder into these 2 holes in the tags right in the middle, like so. And that's how I'm going to do all of the resistors now. I'll just go along and I'll solder them in place in them little tags at the end. Now we're on to R16, which is fitted over here. It's a 10 ohm resistor. Now that's a really low value. I didn't have any 10 ohms, but I've got these 2 carbon comp 5 ohm resistors, so I'm just going to use them. I'll do the old helicopter twist thing, put them together, and then they can slot in to the outside edge of this board. So because these are old carbon comps, the legs are absolutely filthy. Don't know what that build up is, like oxidization of some sort maybe. So I'm just going to line them up so then they point in the same direction for no other reason than I like it. Give them a twist and a solder. Now again, I'm not going to clip this too close to the end because, as we all know, it will fall apart and then I won't have a resistor. So this goes in at C7, which is here, and then it also goes across 1, just like R17 on this side. So it'll fit in there like so. And I'll just solder both of them legs into the base. There we are. And then once I've tidied up the bottom, like so, that's our board fully spammed up. Spammed up, is that a word? Who knows? Maybe I've got baloney on the mind after my Tony baloney pedal turned up. Who knows? Now that the fun bit's done and the tag board's all wired up, let's move on to the Opamp. I'm going to be using this. So this is just regular strip board that my buddies over at Gajira Effects Pedals printed on. How fantastic is that? You can send them any design you like and they'll print it onto a strip board. You can have it as a circuit. So for example, check out this. I've been saving this one for a good one. It's the Hello Sailor Effects Gibson font logo on strip board. I think I'm going to build some sort of delay on this for a video. Who knows? But how awesome is that? Hit up Gajira Effects with your design and you can have your own personalised strip board. I'm going to use this, however. And if we go back to our drawing, you can see that we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 going down, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 going across. So 6 down is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Give it a little mark. And then 11, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Remembering to go over 1 from that. Now usually I saw these, but this is such a small board, I'm going to have a go at just doing it with my Nipex snips. I tell you what, when I used to build pedals on my wife's dining room table, she used to go mental with them little bits flying off all the time. So there we have it. This is our board for our Opamp. So to mark out this board where we're going to do our splits, I'm going to be using a marker pen as ever. It's a little bit difficult to see on this one, but in the bottom left corner where it says IC1, there's like a row of splits. They've done dual, so like each, there's like two splits. There's no need to do that. But if we count 2 circles along, 1, 2, and then in the third row, we just dab 4 of the holes going up. Okay, so that should give us 2 lines above that aren't split, and that'll mean that our 2 halves of our Opamp are separated. Going on from that, if we go to the top row, and 1, 2, 3, the 4th one along, 1, 2, 3, 4th one along, we put a dab in there, that's going to be a split. And then 1 below it is going to be a split. I mean, you can see all this on the drawing. Hopefully I'll have it on the screen. Then if we go 1 below and 1 below again, and then 1 across, we should have a dab there. And then if we just close the loop there and say, count the circles going to the right hand side of that, we can see there's 1, 2 circles left. And on our drawing, there's 2 circles left. I'm going to go ahead and use my Stanley blade to cut out the holes underneath the breaks in the circuit. You can use a drill piece if you like. Someone suggested a pillar drill on one of my other videos actually. That's a fantastic idea and it sounds way too easy. So I'm going to do it the hard way and use my Stanley blade. Here we have our board marked out and all of the splits in place. The first thing I like to do on these is to add in our Opamp sockets. I always use an Opamp socket even if I know what Opamp I'm going to use. I still socket them just because it means less heat in your Opamp, and that's going to go right over the cuts that we've put in place. So on the drawing you'll notice that there's a second row of cuts there. It really doesn't matter if you cut them, that'll be enough. So I'm going to go ahead and solder that in now. Now our Opamp socket is in place and soldered in. It's time to move on to the 2 resistors that are on here, the first of which being R10. R10 and R13 are both 1K resistors. I'm using these high precision resistors. They're ridiculously expensive for what they are, but I really do like them. I forget where I got these from now. I bought like a big job lot of them. Job lot, I love that. If anyone ever looks through eBay and looks at all the job lots and stuff and gets them, that's fantastic. This one here is going to be R10. I'm going to use the Ibanez Tubescreamer method, as I like to call it, of fitting resistors. So that's just bend it over so it's standing up on end. It goes into pin 7 and pin 6 of our IC. So 7 and 6 are right there. I'll just slot that all the way down to the end. And because it's a nice small bodied resistor, we can see that that is going to slot in there nicely. If we give the legs a bend out so it doesn't move. I'm going to also fit in R13, which is another 1K resistor. I'm using the same type of resistor just because they're small and expensive, and I wanted to make this a stupidly expensive pedal. Why? I don't know. I feel like Stevie Ray would have had an expensive pedal there. He didn't even use a TS-808. I don't know why this is the Stevie Ray mod. I don't know if this is something he used, because he was known for using a TS9. So I don't really know there. This second resistor jumpers over this cut. So you can, it actually jumpers straight over, so there's like, it takes up 3 holes, as in, if I show it there, there's 1 hole gap in the middle, which is the split. But I'm gonna move it along 1, just because I've got space on this board to make it sit flat. There we go. Good. I'm going to go ahead and solder them in now. Right, I've just been having a little bit of a weird moment where I was like, why have I got enough space to lie this resistor flat with 2 holes underneath it, when really there should only be space for 1 hole? And it's because I cut 11 along. I'm looking at my drawing, it's actually 10 along. So I added an extra hole on the end. It doesn't matter, but just be wary, you know, if you've got a tight space in your enclosure and you don't want to waste space, be wary of that. But for me, it doesn't really matter. It does mean I get to lie my resistor flat now though. Get on. Next it's time to add in our transistors, I'm using these BC549 NPN silicon transistors, mainly because they have a fair bit of gain to them and they are really low noise. It doesn't really matter. I've used all sorts. I'd be hard pushed to find a difference in tone between using something like a BC109, 108 or any NPN transistor. I do always test them. So if I get our drawing up, you can see I've marked on the side here, collector, base, emitter. That is to show you that the collector goes at the bottom of the drawing, the base in the middle, and the emitter at the top. Try not to get fooled by the shape of the transistors on the board, because yours may have legs that are a different pin out. So as ever, we're going to use our DCA 55 transistor tester to see what legs what. Now, as ever, there's an Amazon affiliates link in the description for this. This is probably the best investment you can make if you're going to build more than 1 or 2 pedals behind your soldering iron, maybe. They're fantastic. So we can see it's an NPN silicon transistor. Red is our emitter, which is this one here. Green is the base in the middle. Good. That means we don't have to cross over any legs. And then blue is the collector. So we want blue to go at the bottom, red to go at the top. So blue at the bottom, red at the top, and green in the middle. So if I hold it like that, you can see that our transistor that we're using for this one is actually the opposite way round from the transistors on the drawing. So I would have potentially put that in the wrong way. Just a little something to know. While we're here, we might as well have a look and see what the HFE is. I went past it. So 423, that's fairly high gain. I certainly wouldn't be using that in a fuzz face or something. I have, of course, checked both transistors. We can see on the drawing that they go right next to these 2 cutouts here, with their bottom legs joined together in this row. So if I'm adding these in, I just add one to one side of the cutout, the other to the other side of the cutout. I mean, you can mix and match. You could probably use, I don't know, one of these and a 2N3904 if you wanted. I don't think it really matters. I'm sure there'll be someone in the comments who argues with that and tells me that I don't know what I'm doing. Great. Usually I like to use something with a metal can, like a BC109 or 108, just because, or maybe an old Texas Instruments, something or other, because they look better. But today we're going to use these ones. First things first, I'm going to solder in the centre pins of each of them. Again, a gentle reminder that transistors are one of the components, much like pots and diodes, that if you put too much heat in them, you can ruin them. But please don't be scared to solder them. I see a lot of dry solder joints around these items because people are tentative and don't want to solder them. Just make sure your soldering iron's hot enough and should be okay. So now that I've straightened them up, I can go back and solder in the other 2 legs. Now this has just brought up something interesting. As I was soldering in this one from a funny angle, I've soldered two of the pins together, which is a bloody nightmare. So what I'm going to do is I'll clip the legs off that I have soldered to get them out the way. And now I'm going to try and unsolder that. You should use desolder braid. I've just been working on my Showman amplifier, so I've run out of desolder braid, and I don't normally like to use it. I just use my soldering iron to force it out of the way. Not the best way of doing it, but as you can see now, there is in fact a gap between the 2 tracks. So if I snip that leg off, I've created a gap. When I run my Stanley blade down the centre of these after I've finished soldering on the board, that'll make sure that there's a physical gap between them 2. But now I'm going to take extra care when I'm running my Stanley blade down here to make sure that there's nothing jumping across these 2 pins here. It's a pain to take this board off and then look at the bottom of it again once it's been in the enclosure. I'll go ahead now and solder them last 2 pins, and then we can move on to adding some of our silicon wire connections to this. Yeah, so next stage now is going to be to add in all of the wires that you can see on the drawing that attach to the outside of this board. Now we have all of our wire stripped and ready to go. I'm just going to go ahead and populate each side of this and put in every single wire that's going to come out of this board now. So then when I put it into the enclosure, it's all attached. Now we've got half of our wires added on. Let's take a little look at our drawing. And as you can see on the left hand side over here, third row down, there is a white wire that comes out and goes to gain. Well, it also goes to a place on the board, which is our diodes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 2 wires into the same hole so that then I can run one to the board to our diodes and the other to the gain pot. Okay, so on the face of it, it looks like we've wired up all of our wires that are coming from each end. However, there's 2 extra ones. If we get our drawing up, there's one over here above the op amp that goes to the board and another one over here above the op amp and next to these transistors that goes to the board too. For some reason, Audio Done, whoever done this drawing, whoever drew this drawing, terrible England that, put these 2 wires at the top here, instead of just sliding them along and putting them at the end like the rest of them. I'm not really too sure why you did that, but I'm going to move mine to the end. Another thing to note is right at the bottom here, there's another wire that I almost missed off that goes to the tone L1. Now that we have both boards populated, we can move on to adding the hardware to the enclosure. This is the enclosure I'm going to be using. I'm using modern Vox Fawn Tolex, and I've got a little sign, I'll have to clean that up, that says SRV Spec TS808 High Fidelity Tube Screamer. And that's what I believe this is. It is a high fidelity tube screamer. I can really hear the difference between this and a standard tube screamer for clarity. Maybe you'll hear something different in the sound test, so we shall see. First, I'm going to go ahead and get all of our volume, tone, gain and stuff on here. I've shown this in previous videos, but there are 2 types of pots to get. This type here, which has like little solder lugs on, they're my favourite type. However, sometimes I get this type here, which are PCB mount ones, so they come like this with their 3 spikes that usually go straight into a PCB, so that then you don't have to mess about, you know, it's like board mounted. But if you're going to use this type, I advise just taking your snips and bending back each one of the legs, and then you can use it as a kind of hook. So when you tin your wire that's going to attach to it, hook it round and you can get a good mechanical connection on it. So that's how I do that. Oh, another thing is with this one, the gain pot on the SRV TS808 is down as a 1 meg audio gain pot. That's no good. I prefer 500k. I highly advise that you use a 500k, but it's up to you with how much gain you want. Now comes the fun bit, trying to squeeze everything in. I did think that this enclosure offered me loads of space. It doesn't. And unless I suspend this board and risk fouling the top, I'm going to have to fit it right up close to the 3-pole double throw, so then it's away from the edge of the enclosure here. And I've had to snip off a corner of the board so then it can get closer to that stomp switch without while still having space on this edge. Then that leaves the awkward thing of where on earth do I mount the Opamp board and the input and output buffers. Brilliant. So I'm going to put it going sideways right down here, squeeze it in there, and hopefully that'll be okay. Now, before I go ahead and do that, I'm going to fit the op amp because it's going to be a nightmare to squeeze it in once it goes inside there. So this is our op amp. It goes that way round. Love this thing. Gold pins. It's amazing. Anyway, I think these sounded, or this one particularly sounded really clear in all the videos I've used it so far. So I'm going to sell it with this pedal. Our tagboard and smaller board now fitted inside the enclosure. It's time to start wiring it up, the fun bit. With this one, unlike some of the other videos I've done, I am going to do a step-by-step wiring guide. This one gets a little bit complicated, and I have messed it up more than once, so if nothing else, it'll give me a video reference to look back at. First, we're going to start top left of our board here. We'll do these first to get them out the way. So top left of our board is the one that's in red on our drawing, and it goes round to the top right hand corner last tag, which is this tag right here. So I'm going to run that along and through here and just fit it in right there. Next on our list is the green wire on our drawing, just above the IC here, and that's going to come round and it's going to go into the bottom of R4, which is 3 along from the end. So 1, 2, 3, it's going to come in right here, the bottom of R4, our 510k resistor. I'm going to run this one round this outside edge. In fact, no, I'm not. I'm going to run it along here, try and keep this bit spare, run along here and keep it as tucked under the board as I can to avoid fouling the edge of the enclosure here when I put the bottom on. I'll run it round and attach it on. So that wire's in. Next, moving down, we've got our, if you remember, our wires that we put into the same hole. One of these is going to go to gain lug 2 and 3. So that'll be right the way over here. And the other one is going to go to the opposite side of the board to the diodes. So I'm going to go ahead and wire them in now. I'm going to put the gain going round the back. This one's going to go round the back and then meet up with the diodes right the way round this way. That's our dual wires gone in. One's gone to our gain pot and the other's come round to the back of the circuit here and gone into our MA150 diodes. Next, you can see there's one marked up yellow. That's this next one in line, and that goes to the top row of our circuit, 4th one along. So 1, 2, 3, 4, this tag here. And just as a little check, you can see that we've got a jumper in it, and it is a jumper on our drawing, so we know we're in the right place. Now that that's in place, our second to last wire is going to go round, and we can see it's marked up as green. And on our board, this bottom right hand corner here, if I move all this snake's wedding out the way, this bottom right hand corner here, second one along, that is where it's labelled up as green on our drawing. So we're going to run that wire around and tuck it in there. So that's now running around there and going into, if I can get the snake's wedding out the way again, into this pin here, second pin along on our tag board. The last wire coming out of this side of our Opamp board is going to go to earth. Now, because that's really close to where earth's going to be, I'm just going to run it to the top of this jack here, to the earth pin. We'll sort the rest of the earths out later, and I'll solder this one in later once I run all the other earth wires. Next wire up is this rather odd position one, going to tone lug 1. It's grey on our drawing. Really, I should have just moved this to the end and tucked it in there, but I spotted it late. So it's going to lug 1 of this. Slowly working through the snake's wedding that there was before. I'm feeling a little less claustrophobic in here now. Next is going to be this wire here, which is at the top right of our board on our drawing. And that's going round to the top, well, to the right hand side of R16. So there'll be 4 lugs along, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then it goes into R16 right here. I'm going to run that along this way here and tuck it under the board, just because it's the shortest route, and I'm not opening up another route of cables because I like to keep that to a minimum. Now the next on the list is this wire here. It's labelled up as pink on our drawing, and this one, you may be tempted to think pink just goes up to this point of the circuit over here, which is R14. However, it also goes to level 2, so it goes there too. I'm going to run this to R14 and then from R14 to level 2. This caught me out for so long when I was first using this layout. It was a little bit tricky, I'm not going to lie, because it's kind of labelled up as pink from the board going to the, from this board going to this board. But then there's a sneaky little level 2 route on top of it. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wire that into here and then from here over to here. So both of them are wired in. Now we're on to the next one down, which is red, and that does of course go to our DC jack. I'm just going to run this round, tin it and slot it into one of the holes, but I won't solder it yet because I've still got to run the rest of my wires and I'll need the 9 volt for the LED and for another point of the circuit. That's now going round to our 9 volt DC jack, not soldered in, waiting for the rest of the 9 volt wiring to go in. The next one down on our drawing, it tells us it goes to level 3. So this is the level pot. Level 3 is on the left hand side. Now usually you think 1, 2, 3, however, because this is upside down, it actually goes 1, 2, 3. So I'm just going to run this wire from here to here. Same again with our next wire. This one is going to the tone 3, which is over here. So I'm just going to run it straight down here and into the tone pot. Now that's in place, we're going to wire this last one in. That's also going to go to earth. So I'm just going to run it round. In fact, instead of running it round to there, I'm going to run it round to the board, and I think earth comes out of this cap here. If I remember rightly, C3. Yep. So I'm going to run earth to this cap here. And then I won't solder it in until I finish all of my other earth wiring. And now we have this board fully wired in. It's a little less claustrophobic now. It's easier to work, or easier to see what I'm working on. Next I'm going to move on to the earth, just because we've yet to solder a few bits in. If we look at our drawing, we can see that the earth connects to the 2nd pin along on this side, the 5th pin along on this side, and then all the way down to the other side of R17, which is here, or R8 and R17 join here. To make them connections, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this stuff. It's just plain wire. I think this is 26 gauge. I'm going to, in the past I have unwound transformers and took the coating off, and it just takes time to do it. So I'm going to use this instead. It's the first time I'm using it. If anyone's interested in this, I'll link it in the description below if you want to get one yourself. But I'm just going to run like an earth buzz bar along here and drop down to the pins that I need to. And then same again at the back here, I'm going to run an earth buzz bar here, right the way round to here. And then just final thing I'll do is just join them together. Our 2 earth lines are put in. We've got one on the board here, joining the 3 earth points together, and then one coming from our 9 volt jack, right the way along the top of our input and output jacks. While I'm here, I'm going to run the earth from this point here round to our 3-pole double throw switch. And then I'm also going to, as you'll notice if I get the drawing up now, you'll notice that there's a G next to C5 here. The reason being is that goes to ground too, so I'll run a ground from here, so round here and then down and round to the back of this. The first couple of these I built, I missed out that earth wire because it's not on a drawing, and it's missing off a few drawings, but this cap actually filters out a high pitch frequency that you don't really hear unless it's turned right the way up. And Mick from that pedal show, I sent him one of the early ones actually, and he found it unusable because I'd missed this damn wire out. So I think my buddy Warren is the only one that got one of the early ones with that wire in, but there you go. Anyway, I'm going to wire that up now, and that'll get rid of that nasty high-end squeal. Now that that's all in place, I'm going to move on to wiring this board here. I'm going to start top left, work my way along this row, and then bottom left and work my way along this row. First of all, this first pin that leads to our polarity protection diode is going to be 9 volts, so I'm going to run a wire from here right the way around and into our 9 volt switch. Actually, while I'm there, I might as well run another wire round and go to the live of our LED. That's our 9 volt wired in. We've got half of our LED wired into this lug, or this pin, and then from round here into our 9 volt. I've joined both of the legs together on the 9 volt DC jack. If anyone wants to know more about the wiring of that, I did a whole video, my first pedal build, something like that. Check that out. Now I have found a problem. So as we're going along the board, we can see the next wire coming out is the 3rd pin along, so the opposite side of C5. We can see it's blue, but there's no wire in there, even though on our drawing coming from here, the blue wire at the bottom here should have come to here. But instead I read the drawing wrong, and I read that went to earth. So now what I'm going to have to do is remove this wire. I've put it into this this earth here. Didn't need to go there. Need to remove that, extend the wire by basically nothing, and put it into the third tag along, which is the opposite side of C5, which is our filter to get rid of that high pitch noise. There we can see I have attached now into this lug here, this cable or this wire here. Get on. If we keep going along, the next one along is the yellow pin, is the yellow wire. We've actually got that wired in. Good. Then we've got our earth connection. Good. Then the next one along is tone 2. So I'm just going to slide a little bit of metal over from here, over the tone 2. There's our little wire attached to tone 2. If we keep going along, we can see there's nothing in there, and then we have so nothing in there, which is where the jumper attaches. Then we have our pink wire for the level 2. Then after that, just before this earth, after that we have out. So that's going to go to the output of our switch, which is over here. Last but not least, for this back row here, if we go to the third tag along, you can see something labelled up P1. Now this confused me for a while, but however, it comes right the way around to the other side of the board and to where our jumper goes into the bottom of our 510k resistor. It also says P1, so we join them two together. I could have done that off board underneath or something, but you know, I didn't. Now that our P1 wire is in, the next bit is over here on the bottom left corner. We'll start on this row, is level 1. So it comes right the way around. I'm going to run around this top wiring loom here. So it'll come out of here, round here, go round this top wiring loom, and then it's going to come round here and drop into level 1 just here. Okay, so there's our wire going into the bottom there. Next we've got a wire coming out from underneath this cap here, coming from R5, the bottom side of it, and it's going to gain lug 1. So I'm going to run the wire from here, round the back here, round, and then into lug, if we can get it on camera, round the back here, up here, and then into lug 1 on the gain pot. Now that that's in, the only thing left to go is the in, which comes from the back of this 10UF cap. We've got our input and output caps here. The back of this 10UF cap comes out round the back here, up to the back of the switch and into the in lug. Next I'm going to wire up both the input and output wires coming from our input and output jacks. I'll be running the wire round the back here, through this cable loom here, and then straight to each of the jacks. There's our input and output jacks now wired up to our 3-pole double throw switch. Next, or lastly for this switch, I'm going to add in the little link round the back here that'll just allow the bypass signal through. Now our 3-pole double throw switch is fully wired up. The last thing to do, or the last two things to do, sorry, is attach a resistor here going to our negative side of our LED, which is the current limiting resistor, and then also attach together our two earth bus bars. I mean, I could have wired them earths directly into there, but I kind of like how the bus bars look. Oh, and also I'm going to add in some cable ties just to tidy things up. I mean, it's pretty tidy, but a few cable ties wouldn't go amiss, eh? That's the internals now fully wired up and we're ready to go to fit the base. The base itself is currently in my freezer, much to my wife's dismay, and that's because after putting the Tolex on these, there isn't much space between the enclosure and the base to fit the base in. Really, it just doesn't fit. So I find if I keep this hot or warm and then put the enclosure in the freezer, they'll fit together just long enough for me to get the screws in, and then it'll all expand and what have you, and yeah, hopefully we'll get it in time. Also, knobs wise, I'm not doing a choice of knobs with this one because I really want to use these Dumble style large hat knobs. I think they're going to look really cool with this pedal, and that's what I'm using. Right, now let's go and raid the freezer. Okay, so we've got it all together. I got my test board out ready to film a demo of this awesome Tubescreamer, and quick as a flash, nothing. I got my audio probe out, give it a good probing. I was literally getting no signal. I couldn't figure it out. I mean, it's like what, nearly 1:30 in the morning. Yeah, I was just about to sack it off, go to bed, and I thought maybe I'll just have a little look around, and I managed to miss the very last tag on this board, bottom right. is actually attached to Earth. And when we were checking it before and I was rushing to go and pick up my 5-year-old from school, I didn't attach this tag. So, well done, Joe. In fact, I've left a bit of wire on there. Let's snip that off while we're here. So now that that's in there, we've got it working again. You know, I still advise using an audio probe, and I have got a video showing you how to make and use an audio probe. Definitely recommend that. But now I'm going to get this back together and we'll get a test done. Now it's time for the sound sample. Which pedal do you think is going to sound better? The Tagboard Tubescreamer, the Budget Tubescreamer, or my TS808 SRV style? I'd love to know in the comments. Be brutally honest with what you hear. And let's talk about how much each of them cost. Now the Tagboard goes for roughly £350 UK. That's insane. £350, a lot of money for what the pedal is. But it is designed and made by the guy who invented the Tubescreamer. So, I mean, I own one, so I think it's worth it. The Joyo Tubescreamer is £15. £15, that's basically nothing. Anyone can afford that, surely. And my Tubescreamer, roughly between £250 and £280, depending on the components used. With that in mind, listen to the sound sample and tell me what you hear.